You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest developments in medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja.
We love the herb.
It's time for the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. Now, here's your host, Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Friday, July 28th, 2017, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us here. We made it to the weekend, and what a turbulent week it has been. We're going to get you caught up on what's happening in the New England states in our Marijuana Policy Insider today. Matt Simon, the New England Political Director for Marijuana Policy Project, joins us to tell us all about decrim in New Hampshire, legalization in Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Vermont, and what are the latest developments in the legalization that's passed in Massachusetts and Maine. So it's an all New England focus today in the Marijuana Policy Insider. Also coming up in the cannabis headline news, we've got some news from Massachusetts and California, plus more of those Fords showing up in America from Mexico, stuffed with marijuana. We'll tell you where. Also on the show, it's time for our Reefer Rock Review. 420 Radio's Urb Thrasher joins us to tell us about the latest stoner rock releases, the latest music festivals, and a look back at two albums, their birthdays that happened this week that heavily influenced the weed culture. And then we'll have time at the end for a radical rant because I posted an article responding to one of my favorite trolls out there regarding Washington State's I-502, which has been in effect for 5 years, and we're rapidly approaching the Seattle Hemp Fest coming up in August. And 5 years ago, the Seattle Hemp Fest was split, where they actually had pro-legalization people who were fighting against marijuana legalization. I wrote my feelings out about that. That attracted some more of the Washington trolls. So we're going to take a radical rant segment today and address all their concerns. So stay tuned for that coming up at the end of the show. Thanks so much for joining us. Now let's get to the news.
This is your Cannabis Headline News. Brought to you by MarijuanaMoment.net, the complete source for all your marijuana news in one morning newsletter from Marijuana Majority Founder Tom Angel. Subscribe today for free at MarijuanaMoment.net.
This is your Cannabis Headline News for Friday, July 28th, 2017. I'm Russ Belville. Governor Charlie Baker today signed the Marijuana Compromise Bill sent to him last week by the legislature in Massachusetts, setting the stage for creation of the regulatory structure to oversee legal marijuana sales in the Bay State. Appointments to the Cannabis Advisory Board are to be made by August 1st, and appointments to the Cannabis Control Commission are to be made by September 1st. The appointments are spread among the governor, the attorney general, and the treasurer. The compromise bill's most significant changes relate to local control and taxes. The legislation adjusts the local control policy, allowing local government officials in towns that voted no on the 2016 ballot initiative to ban marijuana businesses until December 2019. For towns that voted yes in 2016, any bans must be placed on a local ballot for voters to approve. The maximum sales tax rate, which depends on whether towns adopt optional local taxes, will increase from 12% to 20%. Under the bill, the state tax will be 17% and the local option tax will be 3%. California regulators are scrapping draft marijuana rules under consideration in favor of an emergency rulemaking process so that they don't miss a deadline of January 2nd, 2018 to begin issuing business licenses. Senate Bill 94, also known as the Medicinal and Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, was passed in June. It attempts to reconcile differences between the state's medical and recreational cannabis laws, but it also conflicts with a number of regulations proposed for the medical market by 3 state agencies charged with overseeing the industry, including how cannabis is distributed and what types of licenses will be available. New emergency regulations for medical marijuana are expected to be published this fall, though there's no hard date yet. The department still plans to start issuing licenses on January 2nd. That doesn't leave them with enough time to release the revised regulations and hold public hearings to get feedback, as they did on the first set of proposed rules. Federal agents have seized 277 pounds of marijuana concealed in rail cars containing new Ford and Lincoln vehicles recently imported from Mexico. U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, said Thursday the marijuana was found a day earlier by employees at the Ford Rail Distribution Facility in the Detroit suburb of Woodhaven. Federal, state, and local officials then searched 200 vehicles. No arrests have been made. ICE did not say where the rail shipment had originated in Mexico or where the cars were produced. ICE said Ford is cooperating fully with the investigation. Earlier this month, authorities said more than 400 pounds of marijuana was found in 15 new cars made in Mexico and shipped to Ohio and Pennsylvania to sell. Companies looking to offer marijuana bus tours in Las Vegas have hit a legal snag. The Las Vegas Review-Journal reports several companies want to provide Las Vegas tourists with a way to consume marijuana privately from inside a bus, while casinos, hotels, and bars still ban marijuana consumption. The ideas go against state laws that prevent people from smoking pot while inside a moving vehicle and renting a vehicle solely for using marijuana. Some potential marijuana bus operators say they will continue to push with their business ideas, though despite the laws, the Green Rush Puff Bus recently applied for a state permit. The Nevada Transportation Authority says that application is under review. The Oversight Board has not taken an official stance on the business proposals. New Zealand officials are urging people to stop smoking synthetic marijuana after they say 9 people have died this month in the city of Auckland after using the synthetic cannabinoids. Police say they suspect a 31-year-old woman was smoking synthetic cannabinoids shortly before her death Thursday evening, the latest in a string of such incidents. Police say other factors may have contributed to the woman's death. Synthetic cannabinoids are a manufactured substance that use chemicals similar to those found in natural marijuana to produce a high. They are illegal in New Zealand. Authorities say that they are dangerous and are sometimes laced with other chemicals. Chief Coroner Judge Deborah Marshall says the drug can cause seizures and many people have been hospitalized after using it. This has been your Cannabis Headline News for Friday, July 28th, 2017. I'm Russ Belville.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Hi, I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Please help support my independent cannabis radio journalism by becoming a patron of the Marijuana Agenda. Just log on to mjagenda.com and click the Become a Patron button. For your $4.20 monthly donation, you'll keep our free live YouTube show on the air and receive your own private podcast feed of the first hour. For just $9.99, you'll receive both hours of the show and special downloads only available for VIPs. Thank you for your support.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
This is Marijuana Policy Insider, brought to you by the Marijuana Policy Project at MPP.org. MPP is the nation's largest marijuana policy organization, promoting sensible marijuana policy reform in Congress, in state legislatures, and through state and local ballot initiatives. Today, we take a look at the most recent state and federal reform efforts with the Marijuana Policy Insider.
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Marijuana Policy Insider, the podcast of Marijuana Policy Project. I'm Russ Belville, and joining us today, we have the New England Political Director for Marijuana Policy Project, Matt Simon, joining us. Thanks for being on the show, Matt.
Hi, Russ. It's a pleasure.
So much is happening in the New England states, and the first thing I'd like to talk about is a milestone, and that is New Hampshire finally decriminalizing marijuana, becoming the final state in New England to end the threat of arrest for people possessing personal amounts of cannabis. But there's some controversy going on there as well. And I was wondering if you could inform our listeners a little bit about this so-called study commission they've got going up there.
Right. So yes, New Hampshire finally catching up with the rest of the region and decriminalizing. That's the good news. That'll go into effect September 18th, and all of New England will then be a decriminalized zone. The other bill you're mentioning is House Bill 215, which creates a study commission to look at legalization, and of course we support that. We supported the bill, but once it got over to the Senate, some prohibitionist senators removed all of the members of the commission that were actually supportive, leaving only a bunch of opponents and some agencies and departments. So we had to raise some concerns about that commission, and it may end up being a useful conversation. I'm sure there will be some educational value in there, but it's a commission that's tasked with making recommendations for policy, and the commission's very unlikely to actually recommend marijuana legalization. So fortunately, the good news is that legislators have ignored those kinds of commissions before, and I predict they'll ignore this one if that's indeed how it goes down. But the state is, whether people like it or not, legislators are finally moving forward with at least talking about legalization, and really a big year for New Hampshire this year, passing Decrim and improving the medical cannabis law as well.
Now, is this Decrim or this marijuana legalization study panel, is it a done deal, or is there still time for people to call and maybe affect what happens with that?
It is a done deal. What's not a done deal is who's going to be appointed to it. So the House Speaker makes 4 appointments of representatives to serve on it, and the Senate President appoints 2 senators. The governor appoints a public member. So, you know, the House Speaker and Senate President are both longtime prohibitionists who have never voted for any marijuana policy reform. So we're publicly calling for them to make some balanced appointments of open-minded members, and we'll see what happens. If they do, it could be a decent study commission. If not, we may feel like we're talking to a brick wall, but we'll see.
All right. Well, let's get an update then on what's happening with the legalized states. Let's start with Massachusetts, where the voters passed legalization in 2016, but then the House and the Senate got a hold of it. Can you give us a breakdown on what they've done with the people's vote on that initiative?
Yeah, well, the House got a hold of it and passed what we call a repeal and replace, where they just sort of wrote their own not very good legalization bill. Unfortunately, the Senate was willing to stand up for most of what was in the initiative, and they finally reached a compromise, and the compromise is something that we're, generally pretty happy with. The most significant changes are the taxes. They did raise the tax rate from 12% to 20%, a 17% state tax with a 3% local option tax, and we sort of preferred the first version. It was much better than the House's version, which was just a crazy high tax rate. And the other adjustment is to the local control, allowing local government officials in towns that voted no on the initiative to ban marijuana businesses until December 19th. So if you're in a town that voted yes on the initiative, any ban would have to be placed on the local ballot. But those are really the 2 big changes, and given how bad the House's bill was, we're pleased with this apparently moving forward, and that bill's on Governor Charlie Baker's desk waiting for his signature. Is
it likely he'll sign that bill, you think?
Yeah, he's expected to sign the bill, and everything is considered to be on track for retail to be open by July 1st of next year, which has been the target. The legislature did move it back 6 months in January, but they've assured everybody that there will be no further delays and that July 1st retail will be open.
Is it just coincidence that Massachusetts ended up with a tax rate identical to Oregon's and a local opt-out similar to Oregon's?
That I couldn't tell you, Russ.
Okay.
I'm sure they've looked at what everybody was doing, and compromises often come together in strange ways.
Yes, they do. Well, the other legalized state up in the New England area, the state of Maine, is also making changes to what the voters approved in 2016. And there it is again, that 20% tax rate. What's going on in Maine?
Yeah, so Maine, they've had this joint select committee on marijuana legalization that's been turning through a whole bunch of bills that have been introduced to tinker with the initiative. And what they've come up with is really an omnibus bill that they're putting the finishing touches on, from what I understand now. And it tinkers with the initiative, but overall it's not looking like massive major changes are going to come out of this. And really just getting this moved forward. Maine doesn't have a firm date like Massachusetts of July 1st when retail's supposed to be open. But the sooner they're able to pass this and get the regulations written and start issuing licenses, the sooner it will happen. So looks like next summer. Optimistic that it will be next summer in Maine as well, retail opening. But kind of depends a little bit on when this bill passes. There may be a special session in October. The legislature is not in session now, but if they come back together in October to deal with some other things, then they could pass this and get moving.
How much of a roadblock will Governor LePage be there in Maine? I got some reports on his most recent radio show where he's actually calling for Attorney General Sessions to crack down on states like his, and he expressed a desire to repeal legalization altogether.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people in the legislature are taking that terribly seriously. But, the voters have spoken and the law is the law. Most people are moving forward. And obviously, a governor who doesn't accept that is a concern, but what's he really going to do? We'll see.
All right. Well, a great update on the legalized states. Let's take a look at the rest of New England. Any other states we should be keeping an eye on for the next couple of months?
Well, the legislatures aren't in session, but Vermont, there's a legalization bill that's passed the Senate and that Governor Scott has said he will sign, and it's just waiting for the House to reconvene. There may be a special session there as well in October, and if so, the House could pass that bill, the governor could sign it. It would legalize possession and cultivation. No regulated market. It would have a study commission to look at a regulated market, but that would be a big first step in Vermont. We think that will happen in either October or in January when the legislature reconvenes for full session. Similarly, Connecticut, really there had been no talk of legalization in Connecticut until this year, and this year it really jumped to the forefront of the conversation, and suddenly committees were taking testimony, but not seeing anything happening there soon. But Rhode Island as well, a lot of progress, a lot of support in the legislature, and really just leadership not being willing to bring bills to votes is the issue in Rhode Island. So it's really easy to see all the New England states moving forward on legalization within the next year or two. But the legislative process just takes more time. It takes more time than putting it on the ballot.
Sure does. Well, we appreciate the work you're doing on this. Matt Simon, the New England Political Director for the Marijuana Policy Project, and I encourage folks to check out mpp.org. They've got a link to your state. You can find out what's going on there and get involved and contact your legislators and work with us to help end adult marijuana prohibition. Matt, thanks for joining us again here on the Marijuana Policy Insider, and good luck in New England.
Thank you, Russ. Always a pleasure.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. MJAgenda.com.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
The marijuana agenda. Like the liberal agenda, but with profits. Ka-ching.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
As we prepare for the weekend, we remember that the fight to end adult marijuana prohibition is as much about culture as it is about criminal justice. Music has always been at the forefront of revolution, and the marijuana movement is no different. Join us as we visit with Urb Thrasher, program manager at 420radio.org, for this edition of Reefer Rock Review.
All right, time for us to wind up this week like we always do with some Reefer Rock Review. We do a lot of news. We do a lot of stats and analysis, but you gotta get out and have some fun and enjoy the culture. And so we've got 420 Radio's own Urb Thrasher here to tell us the latest. Urb, what's happening this weekend?
Oh man, love bringing you the best in music and weed. Bluegrass, rock, stoner rock, metal, it doesn't matter. We're out there supporting it all. Russ, I got a question for you on this first news story. What band 50 years ago got a full-page ad in a newspaper about legalizing marijuana?
Oh.
UK, 4 people.
Could it be the Beatles?
There you go. Paul McCartney, 50 years ago, on July 24th, took out a full-page ad. Their photographer had been busted, didn't like that, so 64 signatures within the camp ended up taking out a full-page ad talking about legalizing, and at this time, they used the word cannabis. Yeah. Even in these days, we're having this argument, is it marijuana, is it cannabis, can you say them both, are you doing wrong? Back then, they used the word cannabis, and it was just one of those legendary things. And didn't have a footer to foot the bill, and Paul McCartney ended up stepping up and foot the bill. And as we've all known through the years, if you've paid any kind of attention in rock world, Paul McCartney is ahead.
Yeah.
Flat out.
Yeah. As of late, he's been on and off, in his older age, but as it happens to a lot of people. But he also got, his time with Wings and Band on the Run, talking about, the bust in Japan. So,
absolutely. Yeah. So Paul, sometimes quiet about it and sometimes not. 50 years ago, he was not too quiet about it. So staying in the UK, London's Orange Goblin, stoner rock giants, finally are going to be releasing a brand new album in spring of 2018. This will be the first release on Candlelight Label Records through Spine Farm Universal. And looking forward to them. They're having a big year right now. Their new album is going to be released, as I said, in 2018, and it's going to feature guest appearance by legendary Motorhead guitarist Phil Campbell. Just getting nominated for the UK Metal Hammer Golden Gods Awards, and also invited to the Ozfest meets Knotfest here in the United States. So great news for stoner rock giants Orange Goblin. Brand new album released this week, coming out today, Friday, July 28th, and that is from the Midnight Ghost Train with their brand new album, Cypress Avenue, releasing through Napalm Records. It's a great album. Got about 12 tracks on it. This album takes you through a journey of blues, rock, and dirty swamp sounds. Just great stuff. A lot of great album going on there, and love bringing you brand new music. And this week's release is the Midnight Ghost Train, Cypress Avenue. Go out there and check out all the brand new music. Got a little festival to talk about here in Portland coming up August 4th and 5th. Doomed and Stoned, a great kind kind of a team, a website out there doing things within the music industry, have sponsored the Doomed and Stoned High Summerfest here, held in Portland on Friday, August 4th, featuring Disenchanter, Year of the Cobra, Wounded Giant, and Sarah Rama. And on Saturday night, August 5th, featuring Ancient Warlocks, Claw, Teepee Creeper, and Mammoth Salmon. If you're in the Northern California, Washington, Oregon area, you've definitely heard of those bands. So great stuff. Get out there and support Doomed and Stoned. They'll be having a big Stoner Rock Festival in October in Indianapolis that we'll be talking about that here in about a month or so. They're still signing up great bands. But Doomed and Stoned doing great things for the hardcore and stoner kind of band and fans out there. Got a couple of birthdays, Russ. Mm-hmm. This one right here. Hated this album back when it came out. It was just one of those, being a rocker and a metalhead, these guys were ahead of their time, and at the same time, they were doing it so different, I didn't get it, and that was the Beastie Boys, and they released Paul's Boutique on July 25th, 1989. And Russ, we talked about this tune, but it featured Shake Your Rump.
Oh, yeah, I love Shake Your Rump, one of my favorite Beastie Boys tunes.
A lot of great tracks on there. Hey Ladies, everyone's heard
hey,
that
ladies.
Track. That one even still played on the radio. So To All the Girls and Johnny Ryle and Eggman. So great stuff. Paul's Boutique. Don't forget about that album. Love reminding you. Got one more album birthday to talk about, and that is Metallica's Ride the Lightning. Released July 27th, 1984. And I'm not sure there's many albums to influence more of a genre in metal than Ride the Lightning. When this album came out, the thrash brand was delivered. Mm-hmm. So great stuff, always supporting older and new music and keeping up with these birthdays of these great albums. I'm Urb Thrasher with 420 Radio. Don't forget to check out our website, 420radio.org. Just posted 420 pictures on the website from the String Summit that we talked about 2 weeks ago. Great festival. All kinds of photos from the bands, from the fans, from the camping grounds. There's bubbles on there. There's weed on there. I mean, there's just all kinds of pictures. So go check out the website. Don't forget to like our Facebook page. From the website, you can also download the phone app and keep your 24/7 rockin' weed in your blood. All right, we'll be back next week with another Reefer Rock segment right here.
Right on. Thank you, Urb Thrasher, and to everyone out there. Check out Urb's show tonight, 8 to 10 Pacific time on 420radio.org. And then if you like that Paul's Boutique Shake Your Rump, stay tuned for Big Daddy Fink's Funky Roller Rink. He got all sorts of grooves like that.
He does got the grooves right there. He's from 10 p.m. to 11 Pacific on Friday nights as well, bringing you the best in funkin' funk.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. MJAgenda.com.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earlywine from the Burning Issues podcast on CannabisRadio.com. Learn more at MJAgenda.com/about.
You're not high. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I reject the idea that we're going to be better placed if we have more marijuana.
Okay, maybe you're a little high.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association and the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit mjba.net for more details.
Total war against public enemy number one.
10 federal criminal penalties for up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Just say no.
Legalization is just another word for surrender.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
This is not medicine. This is a Cheech and Chong show.
Encourage people to use less drugs.
I am ill.
That was the point.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Negative reports coming out of
People don't smoke marijuana.
As you know, about 5 years ago, Washington State became one of the first 2 states in America to vote for the legalization of marijuana for all adults 21 and over without a doctor's permission slip. And I was a big supporter of I-502 because, it's marijuana legalization. It's pretty much a no-brainer for me. Stop locking people up for marijuana. Give them safe places to shop. Sounds like a great deal to me. But as I went to the Seattle Hemp Fest 5 years ago, there was a significant contingent of people in red No on I-502 shirts who were allowed to set up booths at the Seattle Hemp Fest, a pro-marijuana legalization festival, decided it would be officially neutral on the issue of legalizing marijuana, officially neutral on the first legitimate opportunity to legalize marijuana in the state of Washington. And these No on I-502 people had all sorts of scare stories and provocative propaganda that they put forth, a lot of conspiracy theory and all sorts of stuff which is fine. That's a First Amendment right. Absolutely. They were also a little bit obnoxious. They would go to all the pro I-502 press conferences that, of course, would garner media attention, and they would literally interrupt and throw their signs in front of the cameras and basically make a big spectacle of themselves. But nevertheless, the wiser heads prevailed, and marijuana legalization passed in the state of Washington. Now, it hasn't passed without controversy. It does have a pernicious per se DUID feature that is completely unscientific, unjust, and unnecessary, really. It also forbids home grow still. So it's not the best legalization. In fact, it's the worst legalization that's been passed so far, but leagues ahead of prohibition. So I bring this up because I was looking through the Facebook page for the Marijuana Agenda the other night, and a longtime detractor of mine took the time at 3:48 a.m. to give me a 1-star rating. And his reasoning, to use the term loosely, was that I was a big cheerleader for legalization in Washington state under I-502 in 2012. Therefore, although, quote, a vast majority of the content is spot on, well reported with accurately sourced information, end quote, I am to be considered, quote, fake news, end quote, because I report, quote, propaganda that often benefits a regressive law or a corporate monopoly, end quote. No, it's not Donald Trump, despite the 3 a.m. social media ranting about fake news. In his critique, though, there are a few kernels of truth. Again, I-502 is not perfect, but as usual, they are presented from the point of view of someone who's enjoyed the luxury of Pacific Northwest leniency. Mostly, however, it's just another load of legalization bashing from a tilter, treat it like tomatoes, making up scare stories out of thin air. He writes, quote, for example, before I-502, it was a misdemeanor for the largest group of cannabis consumers, 21 and below, to possess cannabis. And now, after I-502, it is a felony. Wrong. First of all, 21 is completely legal, so you can't say 21 and below. I think he meant under 21. And wrong, it is not a felony for people under the age of 21 to possess cannabis. The change in penalties for minors, by the way, wasn't contained in I-502. I-502 did not change penalties for minors. That came later in 2015 in a bill called SB 5052, the Senate bill 5052. And I looked it up, and there was this great story that explained how when it was going through the process, this 5052, the state senator, Ann Rivers, a Republican, wanted to have Class C felonies for juvenile possession. He wanted to send a message. Kids absolutely can't use weed. But as the language was spelled out, the felony applied except as provided in RCW 69.50.4014, and that's, Washington Code, right? Revised Code of Washington, their law, right? So when you look in that law, the law they refer to is the one that makes the possession of less than 40 grams a misdemeanor. That doesn't include the legalization that makes 1 to 28 grams for adults legal. So the exception doesn't accept 1 to 28 grams for the kids. It does make it so possession of 40 grams and less is still a misdemeanor. And you don't have to take my word for it. The Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys Executive Director, Tom McBride, a.k.a. the lead prosecutor, the head dude who controls the group or who represents the group of prosecutors in Washington, the people who'd actually make the charges, he explained in the story, quote, "New pot laws originally contained language that may have increased penalties for minors, but it was removed through a veto by the governor. That may have led to some confusion regarding what was in the final bill, but in the end, the new law may be convoluted, but the underage possession of pot has not become a felony in Washington." End quote. He also my troll complained, quote, "As everyone predicted, DUIDs are significantly higher after the passing of I-502, and that started immediately after the initiative became law, and not just after the stores opened." Well, that's not true either. According to the Washington State Patrol's 2015 annual report, quote, "DUI arrests have decreased by 10% since 2014, end quote. The 2014 report shows, quote, "a decrease of 8% from 2013. And looking into more reports on this, I found, because that statement, that stat, 10% fewer in 2014, 8% fewer in 2013, refers to all DUIs. All DUIs. So that includes alcohol. So you might be able to say, well, yeah, the alcohol went down, but the marijuana went way up. Probably not. According to the Washington State Patrol, in another update that I found on their site, drug-only DUI arrests, drug-only, not counting alcohol, but counting all drugs, declined from an annual high of 1,710 in 2011 to a low of 1,229 in 2014, for an overall decrease of 28% during those 4 years. So no, there aren't more people using marijuana being arrested and charged with DUID in the state of Washington. I suppose you'd say, yeah, but that's for all drugs. Maybe all of the DUIs for meth, cocaine, heroin, LSD, PCP, psilocybin, mescaline, peyote, ayahuasca, and all that, they all went down, but the marijuana went up? Doubtful. Come on now. Marijuana DUIDs are down. What these people are hyperventilating about is when you look in the Washington State Patrol's total number of Washington State impaired driving cases received for testing from their toxicology lab, that went from 5,300 tests to about 7,000 tests, right? The DUI test, they take your blood to see if it's got the 5 nanograms of THC in it to see if you're a DUI. So that they see that and they go, oh my God, we went from 5,300 tests to 7,000 tests. But tests don't necessarily indicate people being convicted of DUID. They have to be arrested. Yes, they have to be arrested in order to take the blood draw. But were they convicted? Well, check out some of these statistics. 18.6% of the 2012 drivers, remember 5,300 that were tested, out of 5,300 that were tested, 18.6 tested positive for THC. That works out to 985 positives. In 2015, when they tested about 7,000 people, 32.8% of the drivers were positive. That's about 2,310. And you're going, wait a minute, Russ, 2,310 is a lot bigger than 985. Isn't that more arrests? But no, you have to think about this. In 2012, there was no 5 nanogram per se limit for THC. Any amount they detected meant you could be charged with DUID. That means 100% of 2012's 985 positives were eligible to be charged with DUID upon the detection of THC. But in 2015, according to Washington State Patrol, quote, approximately 40% of the suspected impaired driving cases had blood THC concentrations of 5 nanograms per milliliter or higher, end quote. That means 60% of the 2,310 positives in 2015 were under the limit. They were under the 5 nanogram limit and wouldn't be eligible for the DUID charge potentially. That means the 40% that remain, the positives that could likely be charged with that per se DUID, was about 924, or fewer than the 985 positives that were in 2012. And again, Washington State Patrol says of all DUI drug-only arrests, they went down from 1,710 in 2011 to 1,229 in 2014. So again, the no on I-502 people who said, oh, all of those possession arrests are going to turn into DUIs, were wrong. What else has he said? Oh, he said, this is, again, from my troll at 3:48 in the morning, quote, as predicted, medical marijuana stores were regulated out of existence, despite having been around problem-free for over 13 years in favor of highly taxed monopoly stores. But not by I-502. I supported I-502. Nothing about I-502 changed medical marijuana in any way. Those changes all came by way of bills in the legislature from the aforementioned SB 5052. You can't expect me to tell adult marijuana consumers to vote to maintain their own criminality for fear that someday in the future legislatures might mess up some other law. And by the way, having been problem-free for over 13 years, I guess it really depends on how you define problem-free. When the public gets treated to stories of naturopaths in a tent at HempFest giving away medical marijuana recommendations like candy to teenagers and 20-somethings who are lined up in the hot sun to go watch the Cottonmouth Kings, it's a little hard to say that it's been problem-free. When the state specifically forbids there being any sort of dispensaries or farmers markets and that you open them up anyway in flagrant violation of the law, it's hard to argue there haven't been any problems. When there are stories month after month after month of dozens of pounds of Washington state medically protected grown marijuana being seized in the trunks of cars in Nebraska and Kansas, it's hard to say that it was going problem-free for over 13 years. Oh, and the highly taxed monopoly stores. Keep in mind, this monopoly means several hundred licensed growers, processors, and retailers, all competing with each other, and highly taxed, which I will agree with. Washington's taxes are way too high. But highly taxed is now 37%. That was reduced from I-502's 25 plus 25 plus 25% taxes by those same damn legislatures you're condemning. The troll also said, quote, also, medical marijuana patients had their plant count and supply significantly reduced. But not by I-502. Again, I-502 touched medical marijuana in no way. But what I-502 did do is make it so patients with depression, insomnia, anxiety, PTSD, minor pain, and any other condition not listed in Washington's medical marijuana permission slip law could legally access cannabis. They could go there and just go buy cannabis. They don't have to go to some doc and prove they've got some particular debilitating condition and have to pay those script mills for their permission slip every year. If Washington's pot laws aren't good enough for you, well, I guess you'll just have to do what damn near everyone else in America has to do, grow pot illegally. Except that since you have legalization, cops can no longer use drug-sniffing dogs, your possession of it under an ounce in public isn't probable cause to start searching you and to find reasons to search your property. Every year, under legalization, has meant at least 5,000 instances where Washingtonians who consume cannabis weren't given lifetime criminal records. But please do whine on to my cancer-fighting friends in Texas about your terrible burden of legal, tax-free $150 ounces of 24% THC weed, of which you can purchase 3 and you can store at home 8 ounces and you can cultivate 6 mature cannabis plants if you're fighting cancer. Or if you get the right recommendation, Washington state law still allows you to cultivate up to 15 plants and possess a pound of cannabis. Please tell that to Shona Banda in Kansas, fighting possible 30 years in prison for doing what you've been doing in Washington state for a couple decades. Tell my friends in Georgia or Missouri or Florida who are battling seriously debilitating conditions, who can go to serious jail time for trying to acquire or grow cannabis, who would love to have a neighborhood pot shop where they could go buy a $150 ounce of 24% THC weed. Let me break out the world's tiniest violin for you. Look, I'll be the first to tell you that Washington state's I-502 is the shittiest state marijuana legalization law in the country. I'll join you in cursing the state legislators who clamp down unnecessarily on the medical marijuana program. But Washington state has a far more progressive set of marijuana laws than at least 42 other states, both medically and for adult use. That's the real news. And then, of course, we have Steve Elliott, who showed up. This guy, who, again, in the comment section calls me Rectal Russ. He's been calling me that name for 6 years. And I had to keep pointing out that I actually criticized 502's per se DUID and no home grow provisions numerous times. But I also told people those weren't deal breakers to ending the arrest of up to 5,000 Washingtonians every year over the possession of marijuana. It wasn't enough to veto the first shot at legalizing marijuana in the United States and to hand to our opponents a huge victory. I have never, not with 2010's Prop 19 in California, with 2012's I-502 in Washington, even 2015 Issue 3 in Ohio, when colleagues of mine who I deeply respect were opposed to it. I have never told responsible adult cannabis consumers they needed to vote along with the cops, the courts, the rehabs, the drug testers, the private prisons, and the pharmaceutical companies to maintain their own criminality because this legalization isn't good enough. Especially as I enjoyed the luxury of smoking and growing medical pot without the fear of state-sponsored terrorism because I paid for a marijuana permission slip. As usual, people in this I Got's Mine crowd didn't give 2/10 of a tick's turd about the thousands of Washingtonians every year who were too healthy or too honest to pay a script mill for their marijuana permission slip. So where are those $600 ounces you predicted, Steve? Oh, yeah. Those ounces now cost less than $200. Those ounces are now the cheapest ounces, regionally speaking, in the entire United States. Oh, how about those 10,000 possession arrests? Remember when you said the 10,000 possession arrests would all become DUIDs? Oh, yeah. Fewer people tested are now DUID eligible than before legalization. People actually have an under the limit they can get out of the DUI with. And as I reported, we are at the lowest level of drug-only DUIs the state of Washington has ever registered. How about, remember, Steve, when you predicted those arrests of all the people with non-store-bought ounces? Oh, my God, if you had an ounce that's not from the store package, they're going to bust you. Oh, yeah, that never happened either because marijuana's legal. See, unlike people who sit on their ass, mostly white men, I would also emphasize, who sit on their ass in the Pacific Northwest with cheap and legal weed and a permission slip, I travel. I go to red states a lot. I go to Idaho, where my family members have had to battle cancer and renal failure, and to use cannabis, they have to become felons. I visit Texas, where my friends battling cancer and multiple sclerosis also have to become felons. Georgia, felons. Missouri, felons. Florida, until this last election, felons. What this I Got's Mine crowd can never accept is their own culpability in post-legalization legislative restrictions on medical marijuana in their state. Look, if the only thing Washingtonians had ever seen about medical marijuana were severely disabled patients and their altruistic caregivers engaged in nonprofit health care, Well, shit, that would have been politically impossible to make drastic changes to that. No legislator wants to be seen as clamping down on people in wheelchairs and people with cancer. But when they saw those naturopaths in the tent at HempFest handing out permission slips like candy to the teenagers and 20-somethings eagerly gathered for the Cottonmouth Kings concert, when they saw the bust after bust of medically grown excess in the trunks of cars pulled over in the Midwest, when they saw a few apartments and garages blow up from hash oil manufacture, when they saw unauthorized dispensaries and farmers markets popping up, when they read stories of permission slip mills that were pre-signing the forms, well, they began to believe that this medical marijuana wasn't so medical, that it was being openly and aggressively abused for recreational purposes. And that didn't just lead to Washington's legislature screwing over patients with SB 5052. It led to initiatives being written all over the country, much more restrictively, and legislatures all over the country resisting medical marijuana laws. It led to that inevitable comment from legislators back east to say, well, we're not going to be like the Wild West with that medical marijuana. We're not going to be Wild West medical marijuana. And now all those East Coast states have shitty medical marijuana laws. It's led to more medical marijuana states now where you can't home grow than those where you can. It's led to the last 6 states not even allowing you to smoke bud. But thanks, Steve, for reading the piece and linking to it and sharing it and commenting on it. I mean, can always count on you for a bunch of clicks and the same tired ad hominem attack you haven't updated in 6 years. That's all the time we got for this week, folks. It's been a hell of a week. Thanks for sticking with me. We'll see you next week. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it.